So post-Revolution, AEW Revolution, that is, we are now in an era where allegedly Adam Hangman Page can no longer challenge for the AEW World Title, as evidenced by that awesome and super crazy Texas death match that we had between him and MJF this past Sunday. Super crazy kind of match and stipulation, but I think with the context of both these kind of wrestlers and their history in AEW, and especially where they're kind of their stature and what they both mean to the brand is it's kind of on brand, and actually I think makes sense for the story kind of moving forward. And I also think a lot of people are kind of doom and glooming on the stipulation that was added to the match kind of right before it too, with that whole kind of now Hangman Page could not challenge for the AEW World Title situation. It kind of reminded them of the Cody situation where we had the same clause happen, and it kind of, in a lot of people's opinions, kind of petered out Cody's run within AEW and made it less urgent and it felt less I guess eventful, due to the fact that he didn't seem to challenge for the title or wasn't connected to the world title past when he initially also, I guess, forfeited the right to challenge for that title. Thing is too with that is, I think the storytelling there with MJF being essentially that catalyst too is really interesting. But beyond that, I do actually think it does make sense here, due to the fact that I do think with Adam Page's, first of all, major ties to AEW, I don't think obviously he would never contest for the title again. I think he does need a real proper face title reign with the belt at some point that isn't kind of petering like his first one, and brief like his second one. So I do think eventually he will, maybe even have a stipulation where he is goaded into wrestling for a chance again at that world title, and that could happen. And then also the story kind of Hangman's evolution as his with his kind of vicious rivalries like with Swerve and with the Death Riders and through betrayal and trust with Omega and the Bucks and everything. He's become kind of this maniacal maniac who I think for sometimes not for the lack of forethought, and for himself he'll throw himself over and kind of sacrifice everything for the sake of like revenge or whatever his goal is, because you've seen that with Swerve burning down the man's house. You've seen that with everyone he's kind of been involved with, that they kind of want to point to that ruthlessness as being a signature character trait of Hangman Page, but also to his detriment, something that can lead him to do what he did, with the obsession that he has with that title and with kind of the connection and relationship he has with AEW and his how he sees that pressure. It has created this kind of monster like figure who, even through his like menacing stare, like it's not necessarily that he's malicious, but he's definitely someone that you don't want that maligned intent against. And I think that's kind of what we saw here. And MJF, I think, smartly kind of took the bull by his horns and flipped him over essentially with goading Adam Page into doing this, because essentially like he kind of knew it was Texas Death was Adam Page's domain, which is why he knew that confidence level and stuff like that would have Adam Page kind of seeing red from the get-go. The idea of MJF's character kind of abusing that is really cool, and I think plays to his character while playing to the kind of chaotic nature of Adam Page as well. And also I think his character is someone that can benefit from a lot of different types of stories that we've seen, obviously without the belt too. So I don't think Page is really losing out, especially since he's had a couple of grabs at the title. Comparing it to Cody's as well, at that point for Cody, he kind of was at a different stage, I think, especially being an EVP and having his position. A lot of people kind of saw it, no matter what, if he did have any prominent booking, that it was kind of a different story there compared to Adam Page, who is obviously closely tied to the elite, and part of the elite isn't someone explicitly listed as like a boss of the company. And I do think it's actually a compelling storyline that can help Adam Page kind of rework the interests of people wanting to see him as world champion again, essentially slowly through maybe building other opponents or giving him more worthwhile feuds with many people in like the mid card and stuff like that, and trying to build up like I think a lot more stars in AEW, which they've been doing a good job so far. Yeah, just in general, I think like the whole overblown kind of reaction to Adam Page not being able to challenge for the championship is extremely overblown, especially when the last couple of reigns that he did have, I think, were both, like, I've said earlier, lackluster. And I think also, he's the type of character that kind of suits the chase more than the defense and having stability. I think a lot of the peak character moments for Hangman have been his crash outs and when he makes those pivots that, destroy the stability of a situation. And that's kind of what happened to himself here, kind of with the whole, Texas death match between him and MJF. Kind of a similar kind of trajectory that, Drew McIntyre kind of has right now in the WWE, where, his obsessions and his maniacal kind of nature for wanting to, really inflict torment and, be ruthless is actually overshadowing the want for victory and costing them their success in the process. That could actually kind of lead right now, I think, for a Hangman kind of maybe heel turn or more anti kind of hero turn that can kind of bring him back more to that character that was existing during kind of like the whole Swerve feud, that was really the antagonist to Swerve. So that basically built Swerve there as well, and led him on the trajectory to becoming an AEW world champion. So I think there's actually a lot of things that could be done here that are actually more interesting than trying to scrap around the barrel, for example, for Cody Rhodes to figure out what he would do in middling in the mid card, despite not having any obvious chances at the AEW title as well, beyond that initial point too, So I think there was a lot of different factors. And I think MJF right now as the champion kind of does serve the company more. I think there needs to be kind of another long, maybe MJF, JBL-esque kind of title reign that sees him kind of contend against like the likes of Ospreay again, Swerve again. A lot of the younger guys maybe coming up too. I think it would be super, super interesting to see. Just like how we kind of saw Brody King and MJF kind of go at it, at a Grand Slam Australia. I think there's a lot of merit to be had in having MJF as your champion, a top heel champion, I think you can start to size up a lot of the card and get really cool, interesting matchups that can happen, like a Dynamite or a Collision, depending on what happens. I'm actually really happy about the result. I think a lot of people were expecting kind of maybe them to trade the belts back and forth and kind of have more of like that Cena Orton kind of world title trade or 50-50 booking, but I don't think they should really do that with the belt just yet, and I don't think this is really the time to do that anyway. They both have had multiple title reigns now. They're both two-time champions. Let's just kind of leave it at that. And I think the story for now between them could be over. Potentially let Hangman kind of deal with the fallout of his teammates and stuff like that with losing the trios titles as well and everything, and let that kind of trickle out and let MJF kind of deal with being the AEW world champion. Overall, I think it was a super like a fun decision. I think a lot of people are kind of overreacting towards the no championship kind of challenge rule. I think Adam Page's version is a lot better than Cody's, and there's a lot more stories that can be told anyway in for Adam Page in AEW, I think, than Cody Rhodes at the time when he did the same thing. So I think we don't really have much to worry about. I'm looking forward to next upcoming Dynamite and stuff and what goes on with that. So we'll kind of see kind of the fallout of Revolution and where everyone kind of stays. This Dynamite is going to be kind of the first Dynamite I'm covering. Let me know what you guys kind of think about that change. I know a lot of people have been kind of down on the Hangman loss just because of that stipulation, but like I said, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I think it's actually an interesting implication that can give Hangman something to chew on that's not necessarily a belt or a specific feud, but maybe some character building that we can do for him as the MC of AEW, like MJF kind of pointed out, and even that whole kind of meta talk about that, I think too, especially with both their kind of positions as AEW stars and primarily ones who built up AEW and became household names with AEW. I think it's extremely important for them to not overstay and just to not overkill their rivalry, which will probably be a generational kind of standard for AEW and one of the formative feuds, especially as they are, in my opinion, two pillars of the company. I'm looking forward to kind of what happens with kind of the whole AEW world title picture right now. I think there's a lot of people that can vie for it. We saw Brody kind of try to vie for it. We saw Bandito, in an amazing match try to as well. We saw Kenny and Swerve kind of, neck and neck with each other, seeing who's next in line, so we have a lot of different really fun prospects for, who can, take on MJF. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen next. I'm super excited. Can't even contain my excitement for it, but super, super fun Texas death match that we got there. And I think, it's actually going to be interesting seeing how Page is going to deal with the fact that he can no longer challenge for the AEW world title.